Well, hello and welcome to another exclusive interview by Recovery Today Magazine at recoverytodaymagazine.com, where first and foremost, we are Magazine Hope. Whether you're considering addiction recovery for yourself, a loved one, maybe you're actively in recovery a little while or maybe a long, long time, you're going to find all kinds of topics related to addiction, recovery, and really living a happy and successful life at Recovery Today. That's what we're going to talk about specifically. My name is Rob Hanley. I'm the editor-in-chief of Recovery Today, and as always, I'm joined by another really cool guest that I couldn't wait to have a discussion with. A little bit different, but very, very needed. Please meet my new friend, Brandon Turner. Brandon is a family man. He is a coach, a facilitator. He's a real estate investor, and he's an author. And that's really where we're going to focus most everything is about his book. It's called Personal Finance for People in Addiction Recovery. Hey, Brandon, thanks for taking a minute to jump on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let's kind of start out. I always start the interviews a little bit the same. Give me your story just to kind of get things rolling because, I'm guessing that maybe you are from Wall Street, maybe you're not. Kind of take me through a little bit about who you are from the 30,000 foot.
Sure. Well, I'm from a small town in central New Hampshire, is where I grew up, a poor community, Franklin, New Hampshire, and I grew up without a lot. Financially, I didn't have much. I had plenty of love from the family, but never had much financially, and it took a while, but, I didn't really get into drugs and alcohol until college, and I had my head on straight up until then. And most of this really came from not knowing what I wanted out of life. So long story short, I became a drug dealer in order to use free of cost, and I got addicted to money in the process. Not only that, but the reputation and the whole thrill-seeking lifestyle, needing a rush. There were multiple intertwining things there, and when I cleaned up, I got arrested on a drug sale charge. I was given an option to either sober up through an intensive outpatient program or I was going to go to jail. I had a 6-month-old son at the time, so that was an easy choice. And what happened was I wanted to do one last deal, and I got burned almost every dollar to my name on that last deal. And I had spending habits based off of making about $200,000 a year of untaxed money, and I didn't have a dime to my name. So I had a 3 to 4 month outpatient program. All this is in the book. A 3 to 4 month outpatient program to complete, a very small amount of cash, and a lot of creditors calling, knocking at the door, plus the challenge of sobriety and parenting on top of that. So there was you're dealing drugs, you're making some bank, you're making 150 to 200 grand. You're going to get out of it. You're going to do one last deal. The deal goes sideways, and you lost all your money, and you got popped too. You got arrested. Is that how? I was arrested before that, and I was still doing my thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're arrested, and then maybe if you do this last deal, it'll give you a little bit of some funds to be able to take care of everything else, etc.
Exactly. I didn't know where I was headed.
Wow.
Yeah, just in case things went south.
So you're already maybe facing jail time or something bad. You got a small child, and you're going to do, all right. It's funny because I'm laughing a little bit about, no problem, about, things are not a problem, about the mentality, the addicted mentality and how it really is, like mental illness, I OD'd, I went to the hospital, I got clean, and I went back right away. No problem, I almost died. So, all right, so you're in this major situation, you're going to do one, so now you go from you're facing time and whatnot like that, and now you're completely broke. All right, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, and I did the best I could to hide this from my family and my girlfriend at the time, and of course, I didn't want my son around any of it, and I think I'm just a genius, full of these great ideas, and my karmic debt came around tenfold.
Wow. So, so obviously everybody found out. But you escaped escaped jail, escaped prison, and all that.
Yep, I completed the intensive outpatient program, and when I got my job, I was down to a couple $100.
And what was your job? What did you do?
That was for $13 an hour, working nights in a factory.
Oh man! So you go from 150 to 200 to being completely broke. You're now newly sober. What, 30 days, 60 days, or something like that?
Yeah. Yep.
Trying to stay clean. What was your drug of choice, by the way? Is it alcohol?
Definitely cocaine and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And I did have a run with opiates as well.
That's tough.
Yeah. So it was basically anything I could get my hands on at the end of it. And
how old were you at the time?
24, I believe.
Okay. All right. So now you're like living in a little bit different situation, and you've got your son or your daughter, son, I guess. I think you told me.
My son. He was 6 months old at the time. He just turned 8.
Nice, man. I like that a lot. Way to step it up.
Yeah.
So, okay. So keep going. So you're $13 an hour. You're wondering how it's going to happen, and take us through all the way to where you're at today.
So immediately after escaping that sentence, which is going to be a year, the IRS is knocking at my door. Not literally, they were calling, sending a lot of things in the mail, and I'm just throwing them in the trash, thinking that that'll make the problem go away.
Sure.
I had 4 years of unclaimed taxes, and the only asset that I had at the time was my vehicle. I was living in an apartment, and they basically said, look, this is your final notice. We're taking this and we're locking you up if you can't comply. So here, I just gotten through all that, and I figure I can breathe a little bit, and here I am with another problem.
And you're going to have no car, and you're going to be in jail.
Right. So how am I going to get to meetings? How am I going to get to work? What can you do without a vehicle? It's not like I was in the middle of the city and had public transportation or something, and so yeah, there came that stress too. And so long story short, I faced the music, and I got with my accountant, and I think the fact that I was making a little bit of effort, that's one thing I preach with anyone that I work with now is just call them and let them know you're trying, because this was my experience. I called them, and I just got honest. And I didn't feel like this was something that I could bring up at anonymous self-help groups or with the drug court or the intensive outpatient program. They're all like, hey, we're not your financial advisor, so it was tough. It was tough. I had to roam through this completely unknown.
What about, did you have a sponsor? Like
Yeah. And most of the time they choose not to get involved with that stuff, which I don't really blame them, and given how finance is just such a taboo topic and just something that people don't want to talk about, I'm not sure what kind of advice I would have gotten. But it was scary, and it was devastating to my self-esteem because I was so addicted to money and the power and that rush that, my ego was squashed. Flat as a pancake from all this. So over time, I had claimed, and I got my taxes taken care of, and I had a mountain of student loan debt deferred, still collecting interest that I wasn't paying. Got things right with them. I didn't worry about my car payment at the time. That was fairly low. But I also had a mountain of collections bills, hospital bills sitting in collections. And I was getting notices from them too. So, I just started facing the music a little at a time. And I think the hospital bills I got too late, but I ended up paying off.
How did you manage the stress, by the way?
I don't know. I don't know. Because I didn't see an end. I didn't see an end to the road. I guess it was just something that I knew I had to do, and I knew I earned it. And I knew what kind of person I was to have been running from all those people for so long. I just wish I had someone to talk to about it. And it would help that if I had a little more humility to ask for that help, but I didn't at the time. I just wanted to do everything myself. So that's the whole idea of this mastermind that I created, a Facebook mastermind group to have people join and air this kind of stuff out in a safe environment.
Okay, but we skipped over something really important, because I think like we went through like all of the darkest, deepest, darkest kind of things, and it's bad, and then it's actually getting worse, and then it's bad, and then now I've got a mastermind. So we skipped, like, go through a little bit now to where, so bring me forward, not to the very end, but bring me forward to where it all started to turn around, like, you know, like from the Rocky story, and the music starts to play, and you decide, or you think, or something. Maybe I'm making a little bit over dramatic, but I do think like life is a lot like stories. I mean, it's really kind of the story. So take me through that part, man. Like where, you know, when from the point where all hope is lost to where you're at now.
Well, I started to gain some momentum. The bill for the IRS was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. You know, once I just chose to look and to see it for what it is.
Was it a problem to look to? I mean, was it a problem like...
I had this perceived thing in my mind that this was going to be like the end of the world. I think it was a couple $1,000s.
I mean, was it like anxiety to think, I don't even want to look, I can't look at it, I'm not going to look at it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was like, I mean, just completely paralyzed because I knew I couldn't go the way that I was going, but I sure as hell didn't want to go the way that I knew I had to either.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do either of that. So there was
you muster the courage, you look at it, and you're like, it's not that bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that moment was very pivotal because I gained some momentum. You know, it was like, okay, I'm not going to jail. Cool. You know, that's a start. That's a great start. I can work out a payment plan with the IRS. I'm being honest. They're respectful of that. Okay, good. Now let's get to those hospital bills. When I paid off the hospital bills, they're basically expecting not to get paid when they go to collections. So they negotiated with me, and I was able to get those down for a lump sum payment. So once I made one or two of those paid off, you know, I knew the remaining balances that I had, and if I saved a certain amount, and that was incentive. Like I felt so good about myself, you know, having a win after win after win, just small wins at a time, consistent success with paying this stuff off. And eventually I became, I think, addicted to that, to be completely honest. And
so the momentum to actually knocking things off.
Yeah, it did wonders for my self-esteem and my confidence, and I just wanted to keep going with it. So eventually it was like, all right, let's wipe out all this consumer debt, you know.
What can I do? What can I do? What's next? What can I do?
Yeah, like that next thing, but not in a bad way, you know. It wasn't like, and I think a lot of people in recovery tend to kind of generalize that, that if you're looking for that next thing, that's wrong and that's bad.
Yeah.
This was a very positive thing for me. If I could go back, I would have learned a little more about financial education so I didn't have to work so hard all the time, because I did lose some time there. But it was great to just keep that momentum going to something that I really wanted to do, and getting those results just fueled my self-confidence.
So fast forward a little bit. So you're gaining a little bit of momentum. You knocked out the IRS, you knocked out the hospitals, you're knocking out, I assume, whatever else that you have, and you're going and going, and then so fast start to pick up some speed. So what happens now? What happens as we kind of come into a landing where we're at today?
Well, I got a really good job with General Electric a few years ago, and I learned a lesson about going to work for money. That's a separate thing, but I got really into the 401k. You know, I was about 30 years old. How much do I need to retire? Got into investing, and a couple of my friends in this area were real estate investors. I said, well, what's that all about? You know, I'm starting to plan for my future. I've seen how stressful money is if you allow it to be, you know. How do I take care of this now, my future? So I got into real estate investing. I got onto Bigger Pockets, a podcast that is helping a lot of people with real estate. And eventually we picked up a second property. We live in that one now. It's a duplex. We live in one unit, and we turned our single family into a rental. And that's what we're doing. That's going to be our path.
And how long a period of time is this?
This, only about a year.
Well, I mean, the whole story, like from I'm going to jail on this, on that, to where you're at today, because you said you have 2 properties, and now you've got a podcast, you're gainfully employed, you're a family man. Like, how long is this resurrection, you know? This
is about a 7-year time span.
7 years.
Like $75,000-ish debt load, and going to jail to free of consumer debt and two rental properties.
You're totally free of consumer. You went from 75 grand in the hole, at originally starting at $13 an hour with $200 in your bank account, and working nights, to supporting a fam, all the kind of stuff like that, paying off $75,000 in consumer debt, and owning 2 real estate properties.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And having a podcast and the whole 9.
Yeah, well, the podcast is up and coming. We don't have that yet, but I have the mastermind group.
Okay. I think that's amazing. That's really what how I wanted to spotlight it for all of our subscribers, because as we say, like when people ask, well, what is Recovery Today? They say, it's a magazine of hope. And so we try to spotlight as many stories as we can, that whatever it is today doesn't have to be how it's going to be. And no matter how bleak and how dark and stuff, you can turn it around. And that's a pretty remarkable story, man. So now, I guess let's jump forward. Well, first of all, what made you think about writing a book? I mean, was it just,
They say, I don't know how the exact quote goes, but if you want to help people or make the most impact on those around you, look at where your pain was, or something along those lines. And
is that like Tony Robbins or something like that? Or
yeah, I forget. It was someone of his caliber. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do. It's like, man, if I could go back, I would have done this, I would have done this, I would have done this. So now that I have that knowledge through that experience, I want to help as many people as possible, because I know there are countless people struggling with finances in recovery that either feel they can't voice it in the various groups that they're in, or they may not even be completely aware because maybe they don't want to look,
Yeah.
and it'll get better if you just take a peek and make a commitment.
Well, there's a couple of things, first of all, I don't want to pass over, and I want to get into some of the tangible things in the book, talk about the book and where people can go and get it and all the kind of things like that. But there's a few things I want to come back to a little bit. Is number one, you'd said, I started kind of getting addicted to being on top of my finances. Like I go from, I can't even, I'm throwing letters in the away, I'm afraid to look at what the bill is, all this kind of stuff, to, wow, that wasn't so bad, and then I knocked this out, and I knocked this out, and I started to get addicted to it. And the reason I kind of want to bring it out is, I don't know, this is my personal thought. So first of all, everybody's recovery is their own personal experience, but part of what I have thought about in my mind over time is to kind of reframe things a little bit. So yes, my personal opinion is that addiction it's a disease. It's legally classified as such. I think it's actually, and in terms of opiates, I personally think that we're in the midst of a socially contagious epidemic. That's what I would actually say, socially contagious epidemic. But when I look at kind of the brain, I would say my own brain. My son has had ADD. I'm an adult, probably have ADD, or I certainly do, or something like that. But I tell my son all the time, look at it like it's a superpower. So the reason I say this is because if we have a tendency, whatever it might be, and I think there's a right and wrong. This again, my personal kind of thing is, if you're going to be addicted to something, that is, be addicted to something that is esteemable and makes you feel good. So, being addicted to being addicted, again, people throw rocks, but like that I want to be a great dad. I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great neighbor, a great employee. I want to provide service and value overall to others. I want to provide as best I can. My personal opinion is if we already have a propensity, and I guess I should ask, what are your thoughts on that? That if you already have a propensity to kind of go and do things, are we on the same page in that?
Absolutely, and I loved how you worded that. that was brilliant.
I can't do it again, but
that's okay. And it really comes down to focus. I think is when you are so focused on a result, and the addict mind is an example of that. A just completely brilliant mind. I mean, some of the things that we did to get what we want were absolutely brilliant. It just channeled in the wrong direction.
I think so too. Yeah.
And when you can focus on something, and you mentioned Think and Grow Rich, when we weren't recording here, that book talks about obsession and how it's a
definite major purpose.
Yeah, yeah, and
backed by a burning desire, it says a burning desire. Yeah.
Yeah, and that book changed my life, by the way.
Yeah.
So if you want a result so bad that's for the right reasons, and you have the ability to channel your focus so intensely into one direction that it becomes obsessive, your brain is going to download these ideas from a higher source. And it's
because they're floating around out there, right?
They're available, and that's part of the subconscious mind is going to reveal wherever you're focused at. And I touch on that in my book, is that if we want something, but we're focused on what we don't want, your subconscious mind is going to reveal where your focus is applied, thinking that that's what you want.
Yeah. I think of recovery overall is, when I've done a little bit of writing for recovery, or one of the things I'd say is recovery means you get your life back, but you get it back better than you could have ever imagined it. So like a country music song, they play backwards type of thing. Is that, your dog comes back alive, your girlfriend comes back, all the kind of stuff like that. But now it's actually a little bit more designed. So first and foremost, number one, stay alive. Number two, stay sober, right? Don't die, stay sober. But we're really talking about a whole person. I believe spiritually, family, community, financially, all of this kind of stuff to just be really, I think, who you were intended to be in the first place. That's kind of my whole thing. So I love the fact that we're actually going to talk about finance. We'll kind of jump into a couple of the tangibles of the book here. But I love the fact because I think that it is so not taught. And I love this when we connected, because I'm like, this is really a critical piece that's actually missing. And although, your sponsor probably is maybe not the best person to give you financial advice, and I understand maybe there's legal round, type of thing, or I don't want to, type of thing. But I think that there should be at least some kind of cornerstone things that we could talk about that would help a person out, because it really is all about building self-esteem, and finances are a gigantic, it's a huge part of it. I mean, if you're worried about money and stuff like that, it's a huge part. So tell me a little bit about how the whole idea, like, I think I'm going to write a book. I mean, you must have felt like you're pretty dialed in on your own philosophy for this, to think like to get beyond, like, because you seem like a real humble kind of guy, like to think like, who am I to write a book? So take me through that.
I did experience that. The imposter syndrome, I think is what they call it. Because I don't know everything about money, and there's so many different people out there that are mentors. All I really did was I gathered a bunch of resources that worked for me. I dumped them into a book, a lot about credit and credit repair and all that too. I wrote my personal story to establish my rapport with the addict and the alcoholic. And I went through, I weave my story in and out of it to let the reader know at times, that if you're experiencing something here, this is where I was at. I'm also there. But writing a book was something I've wanted to do since I was a kid. I was 7 years old, and I would go up to my grandparents' house, and I would spend hours in that obsessive sort of state of I was the work. Like, I became the words on the paper. I was so intensely focused. and it was sort of like therapeutic. And I'm like, huh, like I've always wanted to be an author. I got a coach, and a couple months into it, this was sort of a revelation that I had that I'm going to write a book for personal finance for people in recovery because A, it's something I've always wanted to do, and B, it can help a lot of people.
And C, you're qualified because you have your own story of what you did and what you did to get out of it too.
Yeah, and it's easy to get in that comparison trap where, I'm not Dave Ramsey, I'm not, a Tony Robbins, like who am I to talk about all this stuff? And you know what? It's just the purpose, the alignment, with me internally is where it's all at, to where I really don't even care about any criticism that I might receive because it's just, I'm so in love with it.
Yeah, but there can't, Dave Ramsey compared himself to somebody else at some point. Tony Robbins probably compared him. I mean, at some point they weren't Tony Robbins or Dave Ramsey. They're just some dude that you never heard of before type of thing,
That's a great point. But I didn't let that stop me,
So I first of all, I think that you're actually filling a need or a hole that is very much needed because obviously, when you're recovering, a lot of times your health is destroyed. I see a lot of people. I love it. They get into fitness. It's good for your brain. I know we kind of talked about that a little bit. You being a competitive power lifter, at least a quasi-competitive power lifter, releases dopamine and things like that in your brain. People wanting to, they get really into fitness and looking good and things like that. Love all of it. I think that it is great. But I haven't really come across anybody that's talking about how do you use the credit system. What do you do when you got a horrible credit score, you're in debt, you're all this kind of stuff like that. How do you get ahead of it? So let's jump a little bit into, and by the way, on the writing, that's really cool that you said you started writing when you're, wanting to write when you're 7. I was, really pleased when you sent me a couple of things over about one of your blogs here, and I was like, this guy, he writes really well. It's actually very personal. It connected with me really well. But let's jump a little bit into some of the tangible things that people can take away overall from this, and then we can tell them where they can get the book and all that kind of stuff like that as well. But what are, looking at something here, the Big 5, et cetera, but what are the first things maybe from this blog or from that comes to mind that somebody should do first and foremost? Because, and I know this is actually you focus on the mental side though too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first one was to clear up anything going on with lawsuits in that blog, anything to do with legal trouble, only because that was my experience. I not only had to, but, when they were knocking at my door, the IRS, that gave me a strong desire to want to clean the slate with them. But the fact is, if I wasn't forced to do that, how long would I have let that just ride?
Yeah.
And I would have been living dirty while trying to stay clean. So it was all about getting my conscience right in the concept of finance. That's what that one was.
So the first thing is kind of face the music. I heard you say that. And then how tangibly do they go? So if they have debt, they have different things like that. How do you even begin? How do you know where to even begin?
That's a great question because it's completely overwhelming. And this is in the book. I do refer to Dave Ramsey's 4 walls. He's got food, shelter, utilities, and then transportation. So you got to stay out of jail, like first and foremost, right? So I mean, at least becoming honest with them and working it out with them can get you in the right direction. But if you're wondering which debts to pay off first, make sure the food, shelter, and the utilities and water and the transportation are covered. And then from there, what I usually have people do is to write out the remaining bills and then write out a consequence for not paying that bill. And find out which one is most urgent, because a lot of people, they have, their expenses are going to outweigh their income, and it's going to get tight for a while. So just as long as our survival needs are met with the food, shelter, and water, and the transportation to keep those things going, That will relieve the stress. It's like, there's no sense in being current on your credit card bills and then.
What's the point of writing out the consequence of not following through? What's the point of that? Is it like pain pleasure type of thing? Because I know that you like the mental side of stuff. So.
Absolutely. First off, anything that you put in writing, your mind, your focus is going to be directed to that writing, and it's going to cancel out any other internal dialogue going on in your head and really put emphasis on that what you're writing down is important. So that's one. And then two, yes, that's going to be the painful experience that you're going to have if this is procrastinated. So whichever the least damaging of those are, those is still call the creditor and be honest and tell them, hey, this is my situation. I'm an addict or an alcoholic. I'm finally getting around to all this stuff. I apologize, like a financial amends sort of thing. And then the ones that are the least damaging to your situation, those have to get put on the back burner, because if you have no cash flow, if your expenses are outweighing your income, somebody has to go unpaid. And you don't need to really feel bad about that if you're addressing the problem. But that's just a way of sort of prioritizing it.
Everybody can't get in the boat all at one time, maybe.
Exactly. And then being able to accept that, I think, is huge too.
Yeah. So the first thing is you take care of your own basic needs, because you got to put your oxygen mask on first. You can't pay any debts unless you're eating and stuff like that. That's the first part. And then you're going to decide what the consequence of this is. And then one thing, and I don't want to give everything away from the book or anything like that at all, but talk a little bit about kind of some of the things I read like in your blog about like how you actually prioritize debt, pay it off, and then why you do it in the sequence that you would suggest. So I guess first of all, you got to have an excess, right? I mean, if you have just enough for food, water, housing, or something, you got to change something. Where do you live? What you drive? What you eat? Right? All of these things, because there has to be. The first thing is you got to have some kind of excess, correct?
Right. Yeah, and that would be in the finance world positive cash flow. You need more income than expenses. So that can take some time to develop the momentum to get that going. And every case is different, so it's hard to just say, this system, if you just do this, it's going to work, because it's going to be different for everybody's situation. So that's why I think it's important to seek out some type of help from someone who's been there, who can look at your situation and just kind of see what's going on.
A coach.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is one of the things, by the way, you do, right? So.
Yep, exactly, and I absolutely love it. I'm a nerd for numbers, and I'm an even bigger nerd for the mindset that is required to reach those goals. And every single addict or an alcoholic is a prime example of that mind. And if you can take that and shift it to a different solution or a different result, I mean, it's amazing to see what some people are capable of.
It's like going from the dark, like on Star Wars, it's like going from the dark side or something like that, shifting it over into something that's positive. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's unreal,
So we take all your debts, and I want to give a little bit of kind of what's in the book. So we take all the debts, and then we organize them into least to most, go through a little bit of that. Why?
Yeah. Well, there's two things you can do. Usually when the cash flow is tight, Dave Ramsey's debt snowball is good, but if you want to save money long term, at some point you might want to switch over to the debt avalanche, which is.
So go through the snowball though first. What is that?
Yeah, the snowball is when you list out. It's basically done by the amount owed, the amount of debt, not so much the payment, but the amount owed. So if you have a $200, $300 balance, a $1,000 balance, and a $2,000 balance, you would want to pay off the smallest one first. And then whatever's left over from that money that you would be contributing to that payment, you roll into the next smallest one. So it's wiping out monthly payments in very small successive increments. But
you attack the smallest one first until attack until it's gone, right?
Right.
And then instead of taking that money and then spending it on something else, you take that money that you were attacking with that, and now you attack the next rung on the ladder, attack until it's gone, right?
Right. So you're applying that laser focus to one area.
This is how people actually go all the way through and start paying off big debt, because they're making payments to everything, but a little bit extra to the first one, and then they're going to roll it to the next one, and then they're going to take those and roll it to the. So it's almost like it's a compounding debt payoff.
Yes, that's what it does. It compounds results, and when you get to a certain point, when your credit gets better, you can even refinance some of those. Like, say you have a $30,000 loan, you're like, wow, that's going to be 3 years till I can pay that off. Excuse me. You now have options to refinance and get a lower interest rate, lower the payment, and the whole nine.
Yeah.
So there's not just one way of doing things, and at that point you can. It depends on the individual, but you can use the debt avalanche. If you have a monstrous interest rate at 12% or something, that's worth looking at, because what if that's your biggest balance? Say you have a $30,000 balance and it's at some astronomical interest rate, that needs to be addressed at some point. So the debt snowball is great for getting momentum, and then once you have the breathing room and that stress load dies down a little bit, now you can get strategic and actually learn the game.
And so do you teach some of this stuff too then? Is it the book outline and you teach some of this stuff as well, like on how to use credit and how to do this kind of stuff too? Or
Absolutely. I lay out all the information. I don't give a lot of examples because they're going to change so much from person to person, but all the information is right there. It's laid out, and the person can use it how it applies to their particular situation.
So you're a living example of somebody that was just like, what the hell am I going to do? I just narrowly escaped all of these things to 7 years later, have one house. You got not one property, but you have two properties. And I assume your credit's got to be decent because you got a property. You got a couple properties, right?
Yeah, somewhere between 750 and 800, I think.
Come on, man! From like drug dealing guy, 200 grand to 750 and 800. That credit, that's phenomenal. What do you see down the road? What's your goal? What's your where are you going? What do you want to do? You're going to be a real estate king of Greater Boston or what?
All right, so it's funny you asked. Things change over time, but right now I want to reach as many people in recovery as possible with financial coaching. I don't want them to need me by the time I'm done with them. I want them to be educated. This isn't about creating a dependency. I want them to be fully independent and doing their own thing by the time that we're done coaching. And I also want to invest in real estate as time goes on. That's my investment vehicle. It's not better than the stock market or anything else. It's just something that I like. And I want to write more books. And passive income will allow me to do that. It will free up time so that I can help more people.
Passive income from real estate and whatnot like that, huh?
Yep.
Cool. I really like it, man. I think that you're doing a good thing. I know that you're doing a great thing, I will say. One of my great friends, that's one of our huge part of our family here in Recovery Today, Colin Scummy Morrison. A perfect example. He was a young multimillionaire rock star motocross rider. I say he's a rock star in the motocross world, traveling the world, and got the bug, got it. You break a lot of bones and things like that. It's a hard life, partying, opiate addict, and then when he finally got clean, he came out of treatment, and he had like just the clothes on his back, moved in with his dad, and that was about 8 years or so ago. But only this year, now he's married. He just bought a house. So I think the whole idea that you can go from, he's got a business. Several businesses actually, but I like the whole thing that you can go from like where am I all the way to I have a job, I have a spouse, I have children, I have people that are depending on me. All of this kind of like I'm a valued, well, you're already valuable, but that you're a contributing member overall to like society and stuff like that, I think is a really cool thing. And I just see it as kind of a next step or another step piece to the whole overall recovery process.
Yes, absolutely.
So, what's the name of the book? And it's going to be on Amazon and everything. We'll have a link in here too, or what?
Yep, it's called Personal Finance for People in Addiction Recovery. I wanted it to be pretty straightforward and right there in the title. Nice.
And so if somebody wants to get back to you also, where do they do that? How do they do that? If they're thinking like, well, maybe I either need I'd like to talk to somebody about stuff. I mean, I know that I'm assuming that it's not like you're a financial planner, but you're somebody that can actually relate to them and the mentality of an addict and just give them practical kind of stuff. Where and how would they do that?
You can find me on Facebook, also on Instagram, also on LinkedIn, and my website, moneymatterspersonalfinance.com, is a good place to go.
Money Matters Personal Finance?
Yep, that's the name of my company.
Okay.
And any one of those ways, I'll take a message on Facebook or Instagram or an email or however you got to get a hold of me. Just do it.
You've got all your contact information, I assume, on your website and whatnot as well.
Yep.
Great. Well, terrific. I just think what you're doing is awesome. Guys, if you're in a spot where you're, thinking like, what am I going to do? Give Brandon a call. As you can see, he's just a regular, normal kind of guy here with some, great tangible advice and step by step type of stuff. It's a real pleasure to sit and kind of pick your brain a little bit, learn a little bit about you, and see what this is all about. So thanks for taking a minute to jump on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Good deal. Well, if you hang on just a minute, I'm going to stop the recording. We can chat. This has been another really cool, fun, interesting interview by Recovery Today magazine, my new friend Brandon Turner, and you can take a look at everything that Brandon's got going. So hang on just a minute, Brandon.